Hello, everybody, and welcome to Galactic Wisdom. So today we're going to talk about Las Vegas and the surrounding area of Las Vegas. And I actually lived there for a little while, so I know quite a lot about the area and some of the different beings, some of the different phenomena that are going on around the Las Vegas area. Before I get into that, I want to show you a little image here that I've put together about my upcoming contact tour. Now, if anybody's interested, these are the places that I'm going to be going to. Santa Monica, Barstow, California, Las Vegas, Monument, Colorado, Shawnee, Kansas, Berryville, Arkansas, Memphis, Tennessee, Tupelo, Mississippi, Red Boiling Springs, Tennessee, Morganton, North Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and Clearwater in Florida, which is, that's close to Tampa. Gulf Shores, Alabama, also on the coastline there. New Orleans, Louisiana. Houston, Texas, Austin, Texas. Marfa, Texas, where there's some Marfa lights, some unusual lights going on there. Roswell, New Mexico. Tucson and Phoenix and Sedona in Arizona, and Nelson Hills in Nevada. So I'm going to be touring around the country. That's going to be 24 events in 16 states and hosting contact events. And if any of you are in a situation where you're living close to any of those places and you'd like to come out and join me for any of those events, then just join my Patreon group, my Galactic Wisdom Patreon group. There's a free membership option there if you like, and all of the information, all of the details will be available there. Okay, but today the real focus of this show is Las Vegas and what's going on in Las Vegas. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I'm connected to Las Vegas and how I know all of this stuff. So let's see, a few years ago, my goodness, it's probably 6 or 7 years ago now, I was dating a very nice lady that I met in the US. She was from South Korea, and we dated for a couple of years, and I went over there and stayed in South Korea for a while, and I visited her family, and she came over to my family in England, and I showed her around England, and things were going very well. I bought the engagement ring and gave it to her, and I moved to Las Vegas, where I had stuff in storage there, and the plan was that I was going to get a job anywhere in the US so that I could start earning some money again after all my travelings. And then she was going to come over and join me, and we were going to get married and live happily ever after. But then COVID hit, and she was in South Korea, and I was in Las Vegas, and all flights stopped, and it was not safe for her to travel. It was not safe for me to travel. And it was a full year before there were any signs of these restrictions being lifted. And after about a year, it proved to be too much for, well, both of us. And there I was in Las Vegas by myself, with no ties anywhere in the world, and no job because I couldn't get a job during the COVID period. And so I was there in Las Vegas where all my stuff was in storage. And what was I doing with myself? Well, I was going out into the desert hosting contact events. And so I lived in Las Vegas for a while, and I hosted numerous, probably while I was there, approximately 30 different contact events in and around Las Vegas. And I made a lot of friends, and a lot of those friends were psychic and had psychic perceptions, and a lot of them were connected with the unusual alien and paranormal activity in the Las Vegas area. And so when we would go out into the desert, we would see a lot of unusual things, and we would see unusual lights in the sky. Now, for those of you that don't know who I am, I'm a qualified space scientist and technologist. I actually used to work with satellites that were in orbit, X-ray telescope, orbital satellites that I used to look into the far reaches of the universe at distant extragalactic X-ray sources and study them and analyze them. So I know a little bit about what's in space. And when I would go out into the desert with groups of people and we would meditate and we'd reach out and we'd invite alien beings to come in, the things that were appearing in the sky, sure, some of them were satellites, and I've seen a million satellites in my lifetime. Some of them were meteors or shooting stars. Some of them were high-altitude aircraft. Some of them were lower-altitude aircraft that looked a bit different because we're in military areas. But we were definitely also seeing non-human technology. And that was exciting. And there were a number of people who were drawn to my groups who were psychic. And we started seeing, when we were doing our contact activities, they would psychically connect with the alien beings. Because these alien beings, they're telepathic. They're psychic, and they communicate telepathically and empathically. And so a lot of people in my groups were perceiving these beings, and we started to build up relationships with some of them. Excuse me a second. And of course, Area 51 is north of Las Vegas. It's quite a long way north. To be honest, I've never been close to there. I've never really felt the need to, because it's so strongly watched in that area. I don't think much would be achieved by me going there. But Area 51 is out there. And you probably know that Bob Lazar, a few decades ago, went public with his claims that he had worked in, I think it was S4, an area in Area 51, a region of Area 51 out there in the desert. And that was really what brought to the public attention the possibility of there being somewhere out there in the desert where there are alien craft, captured alien craft. And he said that he knew that there was about 7 different alien craft out there in large hangars, and he worked on the technology of some of them, and he went inside one of them one time, and he saw things in there that told him that this was not human technology, like places where, like, everything was smaller, the chairs were smaller, places where beings would put their hands were small areas where they would put their hands, small hands. And he knew that the technology that he was working with, they didn't understand it. That was his job, to try and understand the technology so that they could reverse engineer it. So that, now he was targeted, as a lot of people are in this field, by people who were trying to sow and spread disinformation about him, and all of his records were erased. A lot of his records were erased, but there were people like George Knapp, a reporter in Las Vegas, who researched him and figured out that a lot of what he was saying was true. He did work in some of those places where he said he worked, where records of him working there were deleted, but when you looked in the phone records, old phone records that were distributed in those places, his phone records and his name was listed. So a lot of people are not very good at judging others in this world today. and a lot of people put him down. But a lot of what he said, most of what I've said, based on what I can see, most of what he said is true. If not all of what he said, he's certainly way more. He's certainly intelligent enough and knowledgeable enough about science for him to have been working there, and that's very clearly evident. And some of the things that he talked about, like ways that they would get into the secret facilities, special technological devices they would put their hands on to get into those places, have since been proved to be true decades later. So Area 51 is out there. So some of the stuff that I was seeing in the sky, could have been military. If we look into the sky and we are not meditating and we see something alien, we have to consider strongly the possibility that it is reverse engineered, human-controlled alien technology. But if you go out into the desert and you meditate and you specifically astrally project to try and specifically connect with alien beings, and then alien beings show up, beings that look alien show up in alien craft, then it's very unlikely that those craft and those beings are somehow human faked, because we can target our astral bodies to go to wherever we want to go, to connect with whoever we want to connect with. And when you do targeted astral projection and psychic communication with targeted beings, it's pretty certain that that's who you're connecting with. So anyway, I would go out there in the desert and I would see these craft and these lights, and we would feel the presence of beings around us. Strange things would go on with our technological devices. We knew that we were connecting with something out there. There are a couple of other bases, U.S. Air Force bases. One is Nellis, right on the northern edge of Las Vegas, and that is known to be a place where people who have worked there have said, yeah, there's alien stuff going on there. And further northwest of Las Vegas, close to Indian Springs, there is another Air Force base called Creech Air Force Base. And that is a place where there is a lot of activity. So I've never done anything illegal by going into these bases, or even, I've never stepped over the boundary line into military onto military land. I've walked up to the warning signs that say, if you come any closer, you can be subject to being searched and shot and stuff like that. But I've never done anything illegal. But when you go into areas like that, sure, you can look up into the sky and you can see unusual craft going on. Sorry, I just got a big change in air pressure. I'm just going to start talking about tall whites, and they just arrived. They're here quite strongly, so if I'm wincing a little bit, that's changes in air pressure and my ears ringing and weird things like that going on. So I have a relationship with the tall whites, and I will explain why now. There was a documentary that came out. It's not my documentary, but it's a documentary called Walking with the Tall Whites. And let's see, I've got the wrong file up here. That came out in about 2019, and that's available on Amazon and other streaming services. And it's about a man called Charles James Hall, who in the 1960s was stationed at Nellis Air Force Base, and in the ranges of land outside of Creech Air Force Base. And now I don't think back then it was called Creech Air Force Base. Maybe it was just extended areas and ranges of Nellis Air Force Base. But he was stationed out there in the 60s. And while he was stationed out there in the 60s, people started talking about beings that lived there, tall, white, alien beings. And one of those beings, the leader of the aliens, they referred to as Range 4 Harry, because, well, his name was Harry. That was his sort of Earth name. And he was out there in one of these ranges, Range 4. And so these alien tall white beings were out there in Range 4, and Range 4 Harry was a being that was being talked about in those bases. And Charles Hall was out there, stationed at a weather station. And when he was out there, he started to see these tall white beings. It's a long story, and you can watch the documentary if you want to. And when it came out in around 2019, 2020, I started to watch that documentary. I found it interesting, but I didn't get very far with it because it's really only just sort of Charles talking with no corroborative evidence. And I didn't discount it. I thought it was well made, but there was nothing for me to sort of get my teeth into and say, yeah, this seems to be a possibility. But then one of the members in my group in Las Vegas, one of my friends, somebody who was going out doing contact events with me, she watched the documentary and sent me a message straight away. Hey, Rupert, I watched this documentary and I know what they're talking about. Because when she was a young child in her 70s, her father worked in Nellis and Creech Air Force bases. And he used to tell her and her sister stories about Range 4 Harry. So we have supporting evidence that at least Range 4 Harry was being talked about out there in the Air Force bases, which is pretty cool. And that made me sort of pay attention. And so I interviewed her, and she had stories about her father would take her and her sister and sometimes her friends out into the desert, into those ranges, and they would sit on the hood of their vehicles at night, looking up into the sky and watching UFOs. And she has described to me a moon-shaped spinning light in the sky that would hover above them, while smaller lights would fly around, zipping around, darting around, coming back to the craft and then zipping off again. And she used to see those things going on in the desert out there when her Air Force father would take her out into the desert. And he used to tell her, whatever you do, never forget these stories of Range 4 Harry. And she never really understood why, but for some reason, he was really emphasizing that these stories are really important. And so, sorry, I'm starting to get like a visual aura in my eyes. I'm going to take some more drink here. So we would go out into the desert and we'd try and connect and communicate with these tall white beings. And while we were out there, specifically reaching out to tall white beings, sometimes we would see them coming into the sky above us, and we would see these amazing lights coming into the sky above us. I do apologize. I'm going to fill up with some water here and drink a lot of water because I have the start of what might be a visual migraine. So if I drink water, that will help. Okay, excuse me if I'm gulping down a lot of water during this session. Anyway, a second person, a second woman, who was also in my group, she told me that she also lived in Creech and Nellis. She lived in Creech Air Force Base, where her father was also in the Air Force. And she actually lived on the base. they had a house on the base, and her backyard opened up into those ranges. And she remembers going outside and playing in her yard with children that weren't human. So these are two friends that I knew who, when they realized that Range 4 Harry and these stories of tall whites living out there in the desert, people were talking about them, and we were going out to try and connect with them. Two women, both of who had lived on those bases, came forward with supporting evidence for there being tall white beings out there in the desert. One of them used to play with the children. The first one I talked about, she doesn't remember playing with children, but she remembers that her father would take them out into the desert to look for children to play with. And looking back on that, she thought that was weird. She couldn't understand why that was happening. But again, supporting evidence. So I continued to do my research, and another of my friends out there, people were being drawn to me and my group because of all of the research that I was doing. Another of my friends who lived out there would see sometimes humans walking around in Las Vegas that she could psychically tell were not human. Excuse me. So imagine this: you're walking around in a Whole Foods shop or store in Las Vegas. You're standing in line next to somebody tall, thin, very pale, and you look at them and you think that there's something unusual or odd or different about this person. And then you get the psychic impression that they're not human. So in her mind, she would say to them, she would start talking to them, and she would say, "Hey, you're not human, are you? Who are you? Hello." And they would spin around and look at her and see that they'd been identified as being not human. And they were tall white beings who look close enough to human. They basically look tall, very pale, white hair, white skin, but they sometimes put a bit of makeup on to make their skin not look so white, but they definitely look unusual. But they look close enough to being human that they would go out and walk around Las Vegas, and they probably still do. And Charles Hall also talked about them doing that. Just going shopping in regular places, human places. So I've got like 3 people, all who are giving me supporting evidence for stuff for these tall white beings being out there in the desert. So I host contact events in person, but also online. I get people together in groups, in Zoom meetings, and we. In these Zoom meetings, I lead people through meditations, through astral projections to wherever we want to go, and remote viewing of different beings and remote communication with different beings. And I started doing that for the tall whites, and we started connecting with the tall whites in the desert. And there's so many other stories connected with this. It's like, which one shall I tell you first? One of another person who is in my group, who lives in Las Vegas, another lady, she also has psychic children, and she is psychic. And they went hiking during the day out in the place where I would go out in the desert to try and connect with tall whites. And while she was out there with her daughter, they saw, physically standing there, some tall white beings. And the tall white beings were going like this, signaling them, beckoning them to come out into the desert. So she immediately told me about this, and I interpreted it in the same way that she did, that we as a group were being invited by the tall whites to go out into the desert to meet with them. Now, in order to get out close to where the tall whites live, you have to drive for probably about 3 hours into the desert, north of Indian, not north of Indian Springs, sort of parallel with Indian Springs, but north of Las Vegas, probably. And that's actually fairly, I wouldn't say it's easy to do because it's desert and the terrain is very, very harsh, and you need four-wheel drives, you need high clearance vehicles. You can't just drive out there along a nice road with regular vehicles. But you can do it because there is the National Desert Wildlife Refuge that is out there. That is a public park area where you can drive into and camp and hike and do whatever you want to do out there. And it's the largest sort of refuge or park of that kind anywhere in the US outside of Alaska. So it's a big, big place. And you can go right up there north of Las Vegas for 3 or 4 hours of driving. We left with, I can't remember how many vehicles, 8 or 9 vehicles. We arrived after 4 hours of traveling in the right area with 4 vehicles, because some of the vehicles just couldn't take it, and one got a flat tire. It's not an easy place to get to. But we drove out there into the desert with a group of, I don't know, 15 to 20 people, and we meditated, and we tried to connect with these tall white beings. While we were out there in the desert meditating, actually before that, when we just arrived, we did see, standing in the distance, close to one of the mountains, tall white figures. So they were physically seen in the distance by in front of the surrounding mountains, but they were sort of keeping their distance. When we started meditating, people started to perceive their presence close to us. We were seeing some unusual things in the sky. I can't say that we were seeing anything that was obviously tall white initially, but we were seeing unusual stuff going on in the sky. And when we started meditating, people started perceiving these beings approaching. Psychically, they could feel them and see them approaching and connecting with us. They were standing close to us. People could see their spiritual presence. They could see blue jewels on their foreheads. And we started talking to them. While we were talking to these tall white beings, one of the people in the group, a man in the group, started to spontaneously, well, it wasn't quite spontaneous. Let me explain what happened. We were going around the group. I was going around the group asking people, do you perceive anything? Do you perceive anything? And I got to this one guy. His name was Ed. And I said, do you perceive anything? And he was acting very oddly, very unusually. His voice was slurring, and he didn't seem fully conscious. And he said something that initially was a bit worrying. He said, I feel like my soul has been pulled. And I was a little bit like, oh, I'm not sure that sounds very good. What does that mean? You feel like your soul has been pulled? And I asked him, are you okay? Do you feel comfortable? Are you in any pain? And he's like, no, everything's okay. I feel fine. I just feel it's basically feel like there's a spiritual connection with these beings. And I said to him, do you think that if I talk as I am, these beings can hear me? And he said, yes. And I said, do you think you can talk on their behalf? They can talk through you. And he said, yes. And he started channeling one of these beings. That's where one of these beings basically came to him, put their consciousness over him quite strongly, so close that they could effectively take over his brain a little bit, take over his voice and talk through him. And he started to talk on behalf of a tall white being. And we asked the name of this being, and this being identified themselves as George. I'm going to let people know that maybe once every 2 years, I get a migraine, and it's a kind of migraine where your vision is like dancing around with electrical signals. And I don't think it's anything to do with aliens. I don't think it's anything paranormal. Maybe I didn't get enough sleep or drink enough or eat enough or something, but I've got one of those visual migraines right now. And so when I look at my screen, everything is like dancing around in an electric, static, colorful ways. And I'm going to carry on talking, but if I'm closing my eyes a bit, or if I'm looking like I'm not focused on you properly, I do apologize, because I have this now. Usually what happens is I will lie down, I will drink some water, and it will go in a matter of minutes. But I'm going to stick this podcast out. I'm going to get through it, which means it might get worse. I might get a headache, but then it will start to clear, and I will be fine afterwards. So I apologize if I'm a little distracted. But we were out there in the desert, and we're communicating with this being called George, and it's amazing. And George was looking into us, and somehow he knew who we were on the inside. There was like this psychic perception. He could see who we were. He knew who we were on a telepathic level. One of the ladies who was there was called Elizabeth, and he only was referring to her as Lizzie. And okay, I didn't think anything of it at the time, but afterwards she told me that she always used to be called Lizzie, and it's a name she hadn't used with us or with the group, and the fact that he was calling her Lizzie was really significant to her. It was like he knew something about her that she hadn't revealed. So that was very interesting. We had conversations with George. We asked where he lived, where they lived. They live in the mountains out there. Now, in the documentary Walking with the Tall Whites, Charles Hall explains why he thinks they were out there, those beings. He thinks those beings were out there because they had reached a deal with the Air Force. And the deal that they had reached with the Air Force was basically the tall whites will give to the Air Force or the industrial military complex, whoever it is that's in charge out there, they will give them tall white technology, alien technology. And in return for that, the Air Force will simply allow them to live there. Just be there, have a presence on Earth. That seems to be what the deal is. Now, that is a deal that it seems that different governmental organizations and military organizations around the planet have made in the past with these beings. That humans, we will leave the aliens alone if you give us some of your technology. And that technology has now given those people, over the course of about 70 years of doing this, great power on this planet. More power than a lot of people realize. Power to manipulate industries and governments and world events. So that's why the tall whites are out there. When I got out there, when I looked down, the first thing that I saw on the ground, other than rocks and sand and desert and shrubs, was a large bullet casing. And I later found out that it's a bullet casing from a machine gun that was most likely fired from a helicopter. But that was on the public area of land, a machine gun bullet casing. And it really just highlighted to me that right out there in the middle of nowhere, where there's probably only a couple of people that go to that location every year out there. It's so remote. The contact that those beings have with humans is with humans who are trained fighters. They, I'm not going to go into the morality of our military. We need our military to defend our country and ourselves, but they are nonetheless fighters. They have weapons. They are that's part of who the military is, and that's the contact that tall whites have with humans, with human fighters. And by us going out there, we are a different kind of people. We're peacekeepers. We go out there with love in our hearts, with peace on our minds, with only reaching out to them, asking them for friendship, maybe for a little bit of knowledge about themselves. We're not asking for their technology. That's not why I reach out to aliens. There's so many people out there who are trying to contact UFOs and aliens, and so many people are doing it for their own self-interest, to get technology, to get power. I mean, that's the military, and that's the government, that's politicians. That's why they're interested in this subject. It's not. I've never heard a politician stand up and say, "Wouldn't it be nice to sit down and have a peaceful conversation with a being from another world?" That's not what they're about. They're about, we're paying all this taxpayers' money to these agencies, and what are they doing with it? They're doing secret stuff, and we need to know. We need to have oversight over that. We need to have power. The military, we need to have their technology so that we can. So that we can be in a position of advantage in the world. If they're coming into our skies, that's a threat, and it's a threat we need to deal with. There's all these different agendas and reasons for people wanting disclosure, but so few of those reasons are based in love and peace and friendship. So anyway, while I was out there in the desert, I'm scanning my night vision camera around looking for anything. I didn't realize it at the time, but as I was scanning around, I caught an anomalous light, a UFO, a UAP, emerging, several hundred meters above one of these mountains, emerging and flying down behind one of the mountains. And I caught that on camera. And yeah, I've got that on one of my YouTube videos. And this thing, as a space scientist, I can tell you it was not a meteorite. It was not a human craft. It had plasmic, sort of almost fiery, twisting, turning sort of shards of light coming off of it sideways, not out behind it. And so I caught that on camera, and that I'm convinced is proof that we connected with tall whites, and there was a tall white craft or consciousness. I'm not sure, probably craft, but it flew down behind the mountain. A few years later, when I went back to a completely different place, to a place called Nelson Hills, which is on the southeast side of Las Vegas, and I picked up my night vision camera and I tuned into the memory of that plasmic vessel. And as I tuned into the memory and I held up my camera, in my mind I was saying, I wish I could see that again. I wish you could do that again for me. And within about 3 seconds, the same thing happened. But this time it was closer and brighter. And so I've caught 2 tall white vessels in my night vision camera over the years. So those are a lot of my experiences with tall whites. One of my friends, I've got a lot of friends in Vegas. One of my friends in Vegas who came out with us the first time, he comes out every time I go to Las Vegas and host a contact event. Going to grab some water. Every single time he comes out, he was so excited and taken and moved by the experience of going out into the desert and seeing these alien craft in the sky, that he himself would start to go back week after week after week by himself out there into the desert, into the same location where we went, trying to connect with them some more. And he's a very sweet, loving, caring guy who just wants everybody to be nice to each other, and he wants to end suffering on the planet for humans and for animals. He's got a really good heart, and I'm certain that the beings who are out there could feel that, because they started to appear in the sky, these same dancing lights that would fly around. He showed me one or two videos that he's taken of them, but the camera's moving so much that they don't prove anything. But he has gone out there and had those experiences. And one time he had taken his father out there in the night. It was like midnight to 2 a.m. in the morning. And they'd finished out there. They'd seen some of these dancing lights. They drove home back into Las Vegas. As the father went into the house and went to sleep, he stood outside and looked into the sky, and one more time reached out to them and said, "Hey, is there any chance you could appear in the sky to us?" And he started to see the dancing lights, and he was really excited by it. And after a few minutes of that, he decided, okay, I'm going to go back into my house. He turned to go back into his house, and above his house, a huge, huge vessel, which he describes as a mothership, was up there in the sky above his house. And it was probably 2 or 3 miles wide. I mean, this was a major, huge vessel in the sky at about 3 a.m. in the morning. And he was astonished, and he ran into his house and woke his mother up and dragged her outside. And as she came outside, she saw it going over the top of the house and flying off into the distance. Oh, I've got an image of it here. My vision is clearing a little bit now, so I can see a little bit more clearly. This is an image of the tall white vessel, massive vessel that was over the sky. And he has now seen that vessel a few times in the sky. And I'm going back out there in, about a month. And also, again, a few weeks after that. And we are going to try and see that vessel. So lots of stuff going on in the Las Vegas area. Let me pull up for you again the image of my tour, because I'm going to talk about some of the things that are going on here. This Las Vegas here, April the 19th, Las Vegas, Nevada. That is a Saturday, and that Saturday and Sunday, we are going to drive out into the desert again and camp out there. If you would like to get information about that camping trip, if you would like to attend with us, then go to my Patreon group, the Galactic Wisdom Patreon group, or email me at the email address that you see at the bottom of the screen here. We're going out into the desert, and we are going to camp again out there and make contact with those beings again. Now, since going out there and since all of these, after all of these experiences that I've had with these beings, okay, I'm just, there it is. Okay, I'm going to remove that image. After going out there into the desert so many times, I've formed a friendship with these beings. And now they're sometimes around me. I have a lot of psychic friends, and very often when I meet up with my psychic friends, they will look behind me and say, well, you've got with you a tall white being, an Eben, and a reptilian. And for some reason, those three go around together. Now, they're not standing physically so that they can be perceived with our biological eyes. They are just outside of our three-dimensional space. They're not camouflaged. It's not like cloaking technology. They're just outside of our three-dimensional space, in higher dimensional spaces, but right next to us. Just in the same way that you could have a three-dimensional object right above a two-dimensional sheet of paper, and the object could come up right up close next to that paper. And if there were two-dimensional beings living on the sheet of paper, they wouldn't be able to see the three-dimensional object. It's a bit like that, because they only have two-dimensional perception. We generally only have three-dimensional perception. And so when we look around us, we don't see into higher dimensions of space. We don't see ghosts or spirits or transdimensional beings or aliens. But they're out there, and they can come close to us and stand right next to us. So I have a tall white, an Ebon, and a reptilian that follow me around a lot. That's not at all creepy. They only come in when I am doing contact stuff or talking about them. As soon as I started talking about tall whites earlier on, I felt them come in. And they're supporting me. They are protecting me. They are enhancing me. And if you've watched my other shows, you will understand why they're doing those three things. But you can make friends with beings, and if they think that you have the ability to reach people like I'm reaching people now, with a message that is consistent with what their message is, what message they want people to hear, they will support you, and they will protect you, and they will enhance you. So now I have tall white friends, which is kind of cool. Now, one of those beings that I mentioned, a reptilian, there are reptilians also outside of Las Vegas, living in the mountains. There's lots of different stories about them living in the mountains out there, not just coming from me, but from other people. So one of my friends who was in Las Vegas has seen physically a reptilian. The same woman that I described earlier on, who saw a tall white in I think it was a Whole Foods or Trader Joe's or something, she knew a human who she thought was human, and they were working together on a project, and this human never quite seemed human. She always was feeling like there's something not quite human about this person. And when the human was in her house one time, in her mind, she was saying to the human, to the person, "You're not human, are you? Who are you? What are you?" And the person looked at her. It was an old lady, looked at her, turned her head to the side. And as the head turned to the side, she seemed to morph or change her appearance into a reptilian. Imagine the head of a velociraptor sitting on top of a reptilian humanoid. That's what she saw. This was with her eyes, not just psychic perception. So whether a cloak was dropped, whether a mental imagery was let go of, mental manipulation was let go of so that she could see her true form, whatever the situation was, that person was a reptilian. And so in Vegas several years ago, I held an event in Las Vegas in a city park where I reached out to reptilians, because I'd heard a few different stories about reptilians showing themselves to humans in a friendly way, not in an aggressive way, but in a friendly way. And so I reached out to them, and we went into a park, Cornerstone Park in Las Vegas, and we meditated, we formed a group, and we invited to that session physical, in-person reptilians. It's like, if you're a reptilian, come along to this meeting, because we want to meet you. We want to hear about your side of the story. We want to communicate with you and understand you. And at that meeting, there was a very unusual looking old lady, again, who didn't seem human to us. Nothing that we could prove, but I suspect we were in the presence of a reptilian. I suspect also we were in the presence of a grey, a very small, very, very thin young lady who also didn't seem human. Can't prove it, but it was a very odd meeting, but nothing provable. But then a couple of weeks after that, when I was in Texas hosting an event, I felt beings arrive. I felt the physical presence. I felt them touch my forehead. And as that happened, people around me said, "Rupert, there's a reptilian touching your forehead." And I stopped and I talked to the reptilians and I said, we reached out to you in peace. Just a couple of weeks ago, in friendship. We welcome you to this meeting and please feel free to communicate with us. And they responded back to us, "Yes, we know you did that. That's why we're here. We appreciate you doing that. We thank you so much for doing that. We're here today to support you and to protect you." And now, hundreds of times since then, reptilians every once in a while will come in around us. They will stand in the perimeter in a circle around us, facing outwards as protectors. It's probably mostly symbolic, but it's also partly to protect us from humans, because humans can be evil. And there are humans who are evil towards me and would take my life in an instant if they could. So I actually think that they would protect me from people like that if I was ever properly threatened. So those are some of my experiences. With Las Vegas and the surrounding area, we are coming to the end of this podcast. I want to apologize if I've been closing my eyes a lot and I've seemed slightly out of it, but I had a visual aura that came in. It came into the top of my vision and moved down, and it's moved away now and I can see clearly again, but it's left me with a headache. If any of you would like to get involved with the things that I do, reaching out in peace to any of my alien friends, to any beings that are out there, then please do join my Galactic Wisdom Patreon group. You can join for free if you like, or if you want to support what I'm trying to do, you can join one of the tiers, or send me an email at rupertcontactguy@gmail.com, and I will happily respond to anything I can help you with. I would like to thank everybody so much for watching, for listening to what I have to say. I wish you all peace, love, and happiness. Goodbye for now.